All right. So consider this. I'm looking at some possibilities here. If I do one production cycle for the whole year, one production cycle, how many DVDs am I going to have to make in that production cycle? 20,000, right? I've got to make them all in that first go, right? So I've got 20,000 DVDs. Now let's consider some other things. What am I going to have to pay if I do this? What are my setup costs? So I'm sticking with this same idea right here. What's my setup cost? No, that's not my setup cost. $200, right? And then what is my storage cost? I'm going to pay 50 cents for every DVD. So that's going to be 0.5 times 20,000, which is $10,000. Okay? So if I go and I store this thing, right? I make make 20,000 in one run, then it's going to cost me 50 cents to store them for a year. But this is wrong. I want you to think about why that's wrong. I'm going to be selling the DVDs throughout the year, right? So what we have to assume with an inventory control problem, this is kind of an important like little asterisk next to the problem. We need to assume that these things will be sold at a constant rate. In other words, if we have 10 DVDs in let's say 10 days, that one will be sold each day. That's what we have to assume in an inventory control problem, is that there's going to be a constant depletion of our stockpile. So we will not be paying 50 cents for all 20,000 because they're going to be going away, aren't they? Let me show you a graphical representation of what I meant. And this, so I'm going to put a little extra this, and I'm going to try to explain why. Let's say here's 1 year. And here's the number of DVDs. I'm going to start out at 20,000. And then by the end of the year, it's going to go to nothing. Because I'm selling them off, right? As the year goes on. Now I agree, the movie gets released and it's going to be sold a lot, and then it's not going to be like this in real world, right? But because of the first inventory control problem, we are going to assume this sort of thing is happening. With me? Okay. So how do we determine what our storage costs are going to be if how many DVDs continually decreases? This is the way we do it. We take the average. I don't have another marker. Where's that red marker? So what we do is we take the average. The average would be half of that, wouldn't it? 20,000 divided by 2. Yes? So we're going to do 20,000 divided by 2 instead of 50 cents times 20,000. This is going to be changed to 20,000 divided by 2. Okay, so let me restate that over here. Our storage cost will be 50 cents times 20,000 times a half. That's taking the average of this, okay? All right. Any questions on that? I just want us to think about that one scenario. Let's consider another scenario. What if we do 2 production cycles? How many are we going to have to make in each production cycle? 10,000 in each one. Why am I going to have to make 10,000 in each one? Well, because I've got to make 20,000 for the year, right? So I'm going to do 1 production cycle at the beginning of the year, and then 6 months later I'm going to do a second production cycle. Now, is there an advantage to doing it this way? Well, let's see. I really don't like the way this is going up here, so I'm going to try and change things up a little bit. I'm going to do a new table, okay? Let's do a new table. Let's do number of production cycles. Okay. Let's do number of DVDs made during that cycle. Let's do setup cost. And then last one, let's do storage cost. Let's put them all together on a table. This might visually make the most sense. You all understand what I'm trying to do here? I'm trying to visualize kind of what's happening. We said with one production cycle, we've got to make 20,000 DVDs. The setup costs are $200. We said the storage cost was 0.5 times 20,000 times the average, which was half. For the second one, 2 production cycles, we're going to make 10,000 per cycle. How much is my setup cost now? 400. Because I have to run the production twice, right? So that's actually going to be 200 times 2, isn't it? 400. I want to stress to you where the 2 is coming from. I mean, where the 400 comes from. It's 200 times 2. Now, the storage cost is harder to understand. So I'm going to draw you a picture of the storage cost. You ready? Draw another picture over here. Here's 1 year again. I'm going to run 2 production cycles. So this is going to be, what, 6 months, let's say? At the first production cycle, how many DVDs am I going to make on the first production cycle? 10,000. Right? 10,000? So it's going to go like this, and I'm going to assume that it's going to drop to 0, and then I'm going to need that second production cycle, which will take me back up to 10,000, and then it'll drop again. Does that make sense, that picture? As time goes on, you start out with 10,000 DVDs, drops to 0, do another production cycle, drops to 0. So what is my storage cost going to be? Well, again, it's going to be, you take the average on this one. What's the average on that one? That's 5,000. So what you're doing is you're taking 10,000, right? Yes? And you're taking half of it, which is 5,000. But that's only for what? 6 months? But then you do it again, don't you? So really, you're doing 10,000 for 6 months, so you take the average, that's really like 5,000 for 6 months. And then you do it again, another 5,000 for 6 months. So that's really like 5,000 for the year, isn't it? Following? Following? So this is going to be 50 cents times 10,000 times half. So the 10,000 is going to get turned into 5,000 by halving it right here. Where did the 10,000 come from? How many DVDs we made, right? Yes? Let's try another one, another sample. But I'm not going to do 3 because the numbers are going to be messy. I'm going to do 4 production cycles. What if I do 4 production cycles? How many DVDs am I going to make in 4 production cycles? In each cycle, how many am I going to make? 5,000. Okay, how much am I going to pay for the setup cost? 200 times 4 this time. Let's see if you're catching on to this part. I'm going to be paying 50 cents and then what? 5,000 and then what? Half. So that's like this. I'll draw that picture. You run 4 production cycles now. This is no longer 10,000, that's now 5,000 each cycle. You go 5,000 to nothing, Then you go 5,000 to nothing, 5,000 to nothing, 5,000 to nothing. You take the average, which is 2,500, isn't it? So that's where the 2,500 comes in. Yes? Here we go. This is called generalizing. What if I do X production cycles? How many DVDs must I make in that production cycle? Okay, think about this. If I did one production cycle, it's 20,000. 2 was 10. 4 was 5,000. X production cycles, 20,000 over X. Over X. 20,000 divided by X, right? So if you only have one production cycle, you got to make them all. If you have 2 production cycles, you're going to take the 20,000 divided by 2. If you do 4 production cycles, you're going to do 20,000 divided by 4. If you do X production cycles, you're going to do 20,000 divided by X. Agreed? Okay, what is the setup cost? How much am I going to pay if I do X production cycles? 200X. Right? What are my storage costs going to be? 0.5 parentheses. Good. 20,000 over X. And then what? Times a half. Is that going into your brain okay? Yes. We only have 3 minutes left. But now what they wanted us to do is to determine how many DVDs need to be made per production cycle to minimize what? The costs, which is the storage cost and the setup cost together, right? Okay, so let's figure out what's our cost function for this. How much is it going to cost us? Our cost will be our setup cost plus storage cost, right? That's our total cost. What it takes us, what we have to spend, right, is that. Setup, every time we set up, and then the storage. So what is setup cost? 200X. And what is storage cost? Wouldn't it just be what?
2,000 over X, or 20,000 over X.
For storage cost? No, that's just the number of DVDs we made. This is how much we're going to pay to store, right? This is how much we're going to pay to store? By the way, everyone, well, let's just do it. Let's just do 0.50 times 20,000 over X times a half. Does everyone see that that is the function that represents the cost for us? What is X here? Tell me what X is again? The number of production cycles, right? So my cost is totally determined by the number of production cycles I run. Right? Now let me clean this up. I wanted you to see that 0.5 is really a half, isn't it?
Yes.
And a half times a half is a fourth.
Oh.
Isn't it? So I'm going to go 200X plus 20,000 over X times a fourth. And then 4 goes into 20,000 how many times? So I'm just going to reduce this fraction. 5,000 over X. Do y'all see where that came from? Okay. On a separate piece of paper, if you'd like to do this, this is optional. You may turn that into me when we return from spring break. What I want you to do is find the maximum of that function. Basically finish off this question. This is the function, this is your cost function. Find its maximum value, or sorry, we want minimum cost, don't we? Minimum? So we want to know where this goes down then up, right? You have to take derivative of this. This is not a nice one. You got to mess with this. So that's an optional bonus, has to be separate. Okay? All right, have a good spring break, everyone. Be safe. I've got to head to my next class right now because I have a test to give. You get one?
The loss.
Yeah, if you have that sheet from last time. Yep, thank you.
Is that the quiz?
It was the take home, yes.